Morning. I'm sorry to hear about the time, and I will try to cut my 2-hour address down to a reasonable 1.5 hours. I do want to say good morning to you first. I also want to tell you it's so depressing to keep listening at these various conferences of the problems that media faces in this country, other countries, during this terrible and very difficult transition period. And I hope that I will do two things. One is tell you some things that I know and maybe give you some inspiration. First, I should tell you that I'm holding up here something you can get off the web. It's from the International Federation of Journalists. And it was a group of people who sat down before the International Federation of Journalists and looked at the media around the world and came up with this document. If you go to the IFJ website, you'll notice that there's a flag on the right-hand side, which talks about their Congress, the IFJ Congress. And this is the major paper that will be presented at the Congress in less than 2 weeks, or excuse me, in 2 weeks. In its very first paragraph, it talks about the problems we're facing, but it says to the journalists, we also have to have some fresh inspiration to rekindle the spirit of mission and solidarity in our work. And I think that's one of the things that I guess I'm going to be doing here. I sit and I listen to this conference, and last week I was in the United States for another one of these, and 2 weeks before I was at another thing, and I worked on this particular paper as well. So everybody's thinking about it. At the beginning, it was hard to define the problems. Now I think we all know about the problems. Not really problems, they are change. Many of it brought on by technology. And there's other reasons for the changes as well. But it doesn't mean the fundamental issue of why people should choose to work in the media are still not there. It's public good. It's public information. It's part of the democratic process, on and on and on. The problems that we have now is that the commercial side of the media has taken over from the, quote, public good side of the media. There are many who may be a little bit more on the left than others that would suggest that none of the professional media, quote unquote, because it was always owned by people that who were seeking profit, that none of it really was intended for any public good. I reject that to a certain extent because I think there are people, whether they're in this profession or another profession, say, I want to do this, and I want to do it as well as I can, and I also want to make some money while I'm doing it. And it's within those bounds that you get good media. What's happening now is just horrific. The interesting thing about it is, in some cases, it's because of the fact that technology has changed society so dramatically. I don't have to repeat, and many of you who are younger are living the life within the internet. So we know all that. What the problem is that the media industry ran away with itself. I'll be very, very clear that the problems we face in places like Canada, worse in the United States, and to some degree in Western Europe, are not shared around the world. Newspaper readership is on the increase in all the other places in the world. In Africa, in Asia, particularly in 2 countries in Asia, India and China. And all that you have to see is a slight increase in newspaper readership in China, and it makes the world figure look good. And the reason that in those particular countries in Africa, and there's quite a bit in this paper about Africa, why there's an increase, is there's more literacy, and there's also more modern technology of the old kind, which enables more people to get to newspapers. So you have this dichotomy around the world. Coming back to our own country, we have problems that basically are commercial. I was interested last night, you heard about Shaw being an elephant. Last night when I got home from our evening event, between 12 and 1 o'clock on the CBC, and Carol Offs, as it happened, was on. And the last item on the show, just before 1 o'clock, she was interviewing, I think he's the CEO of Shaw. And she kept talking to him about what are they going to do now that they have it. They just spent $2 billion. How's it going to work? Blah, blah, blah. And the guy was not bad. He was pretty good. He answered everything. And then she asked him the question, and what are you going to do about providing more Canadian content? And believe it or not, the interview stopped. There was a pause, 1 second, 2 seconds. And I was thinking as I was listening to this, he is going to say, well, we'll see in due time. And sure enough, about 5, 6 seconds later, he says, well, we'll have to see in due time. And it's not here, I didn't mention that to you to tell you I figured out what I was going to say, is I know why he said that. It's because they have no plan. They have no idea about Canadian content. He said, you know, on our services now, we provide 33,000 hours over X number of years. He's talking about, like, I live here, you live here, if you have Rogers. He's talking about the fact that Shaw does have a community channel and puts on what it puts on. She was talking about, are you going to do drama? Are you going to do culture? Are you going to do news? Are you going to do all those important things? And the reason I mentioned the Shaw thing is that on the newspaper side particularly, but on television as well, the people who created much of the problems about that is existent in the Canadian media right now are the people we're relying on to get us out of the problem. Now, one group that we don't have to rely on anymore is a group where we have several hundred people at 5 different of the CanWest 11 dailies. And they're, as you know, in bankruptcy protection, both on the newspaper division and on the other one. And why are they? Because they build up a debt of $4 billion, could never pay it off, despite the fact that both parts of the operation, in fact, have been making money. They just did not make enough to pay off the debt. And why are the debts so bad? The debts are so bad because in the old days, as you probably know, newspapers particularly, and television, Lord Thompson, the first original Mr. Thompson, who when he got the license in Scotland to have a television show, made the remark, owning a television station is a license to print money. Owning a newspaper was also a license to print money. A lot of us didn't know about it because the papers were always very quiet about their high percentage of profits. So when they bought the newspapers, they bought it at that level of profit. I was in Norway last year, and the publisher of the largest paper in Norway said years ago in Norway, which has a very vibrant press and does not have the problems we have in Canada about the media. And he said, you know, we used to make 25% profit. It was automatic. But you know what? I'm content with what I made last year. And last year he was talking about was 2008 and 9 when it was bad. He said, I'm content with my 7% profit. He is content because he can afford to be it and because he actually believes in journalism. Our people weren't that way, and they aren't that way now. Sometimes our media companies can't stand still. You may not know it, but the Toronto Star, Canada's largest newspapers, in 2009, for the third quarter, noted that they had lost $211 million in the quarter. This was the holding company of the Toronto Star. When you looked at it, they had to write off $200 million because of their 20% share in CTV. CTV, in the television crisis of 08-09, wrote off $1 billion of, quote, goodwill. And they own 20% of CTV, so they had to write the $200 million down. Which leads me to another point. One of the hardest things for all of us in this room, including me, is to know exactly what's going on in the media. Because when it comes to talking about the media's financial stuff, the media lies continually. That story about the $200 million out of the $211 million, the actual breakdown, which the Toronto Star started reporting after the change of administration. $200 million went to pay CTV, $8 million went to pay a man named Pritchard, who was the CEO of Torstar, and the other $2 million was given to 4 other senior officers, all of whom were leaving Torstar at the end of that time.